Hey guys, welcome back to the Nerdy Narrative. I'm Leslie, and today's video is going to be a book review on A Knight in Shining Armor by Jude Deveraux. I thought for the month of February I would review some of my most favorite love stories that I have ever read. I'm not sure how I discovered Jude Deveraux. Someone, somewhere, somehow gave me one or two of her books. I loved them, and I actually used to own all of her books in paperback, but when I recently moved, I decided to unhaul all of them, and unfortunately I forgot to pull out my copy of this book before I did that. And then once I read this book, I really regretted doing that because now I want to read all of them again. If you've never read Jude Deveraux, she focuses mainly on a family called the Montgomerys. And then there are a lot of books about their cousins, the Taggarts. And this book is no different. So at some point when I began reading all of her books, I read this one. And when I got to this book through her series, it was an instant favorite. It was so much a favorite of mine that I actually made it a point to pull it off my bookshelf and reread it every year. So in my early 30s, I ended up moving and I had to pack up most of my books, and so I got out of reading it, and so I kind of forgot about it until I sat down and thought about what I wanted to read in February, and I thought it'd be cute to read some of my favorite love stories, and I thought of this one immediately. Instantly regretted not making sure I kept that book, so I had to get another one. So let's start with reading the back of the jacket. Once upon a time, as a fair maiden lay weeping on a cold tombstone, her heartfelt desire was suddenly made real before her. Tall, broad of shoulder, attired in gleaming silver and gold, her knight in shining armor had come to rescue his damsel in distress. A Knight in Shining Armor has been hailed worldwide as one of the most romantic novels of all time. Jude Deveraux's dazzling bestseller will capture your heart and hold it. With its breathtaking tale of lovely Douglas Montgomery, her savior knight Nicholas Stafford, the Earl of Thornwick, and the timeless adventure of passion and memory, danger and desire that sweeps them into each other's arms. This book is such an easy read. This book is like a river. It's fluid. It flows constantly. It never stops. You will not want to put this book down. My overall opinion of this book is that it's a modern day fairy tale that came true. So to briefly tell you about this book, as I mentioned, it is about the Montgomery family. And it's about Douglas Montgomery, who is the youngest child of Adam Montgomery. So the story opens with Douglas in a relationship, and she is desperate for a marriage proposal because she feels this guy that she's seeing, who's this big-time surgeon, she feels that if she can get engaged to this man, her family will finally be proud of her. She always feels inferior to her sisters. She just never measures up. They all have, they're all wildly successful. They've made their own money. And she is a school teacher, and she just feels really inferior. She's very insecure. So Douglas and the guy that she's seeing, Robert, are set to go on a trip to England, a very romantic trip. He wants her to go full out planning this, and she does. At the last minute, he springs on her that he's bringing his 13-year-old daughter who can do no wrong. And basically, to sum her up, she's just a spoiled, rotten brat. So they end up in England, and one thing leads to another. Robert and Gloria abandon her. She is weeping in a church, basically she's crying about everything, not just the fact that Robert and Gloria left her, but everything that has happened in her life. And she's like, okay, well, now I have to go back home. I'm going to have to call my family for money and go back home without a marriage proposal, and my family's just going to laugh at me again. This is going to be another Douglas story that they're going to tell at family gatherings. Douglas travels to England with the man that she is hoping to get a marriage proposal from. Lots of things happen. She finds herself abandoned. She's in a little old church in England. She is crying at the tomb of an English nobleman who had been executed for treason in 1564. Suddenly, Nicholas is brought through time to her. After some hilarious methods of deduction, they determine Nicholas has been brought forth through time by God for them to determine who was the culprit for causing him to get executed for treason. And then they feel that at that point, when he discovers the truth, he'll go back in time. There are a hilarious number of days as the two travel together through England to Nicholas's former homes to investigate and try to uncover who it was that caused the Queen to execute Nicholas. And the two really start to mesh and fall in love. So events occur, and Nicholas does get returned back to his own time. Once again, Douglas finds herself at Nicholas's tomb, and she is again abandoned by the man that she loved. Once she pulls herself together a little bit, she looks at his tomb and realizes that even though they uncovered the name of the person who caused Nicholas to be executed, history didn't change. So she realizes they didn't find out everything that he needed to know in order to save his family and his honor. So at this point, Douglas shuts down her emotions and she sets out on a journey to find out the rest of the story, which she does. She returns to the church of Nicholas's tomb and she prays to God to send her back into time so she can save Nicholas and his family, his honor, and his name. God answers her and sends her back into time. Once again, there are several days of hilarity as Douglas attempts to navigate the Elizabethan era. There was nothing wrong with it. Era. I can say these words. I promise. Just bear with me. So she's returned only to discover that she came back in time 4 years prior to Nicholas's execution. And he doesn't remember her. So she has to basically get him to fall in love with her all over again so that she can get him to believe her of what she is telling him, to warn him about everything that leads up to his family's murders and his execution. But is she successful? I will tell you, I cry at the end of this book. Every time I read it, as many times as I've read this book, there is not one single time that I did not boo-hoo at the end. I give this book 5 stars out of 5 stars. There is no one that I have recommended this book to that did not absolutely love it. But here's something extremely interesting. Since I knew that I was going to be doing a book review on this, I actually read the author's note at the end of the book. And I'm going to be honest with you, I generally never read the author's note. I typically don't care, if I'm being honest. But I wanted to see what she said. But I was curious. I thought, there may be some interesting tidbits that you guys would like to hear about. And there was. I was completely floored by her note. So keep in mind, this book has been hailed as one of the greatest love stories ever written. And with that in mind, listen to this. In the 14 years since I wrote A Knight in Shining Armor, I've received many queries about this book, especially about how I came to write it. Many times I've been told that it is a perfect love story, but I think that the appeal of the book for me, and yes, it is the favorite of my books, and for readers, is the underlying theme. What people don't know is that A Knight in Shining Armor is about alcoholism. That absolutely floored me. I never saw past the love story to get that theme. Never once. And once I read that, I was just absolutely dumbfounded. And then my brain started working back through the story and I thought, how did I miss that? So the reason why she wrote it about alcoholism is this. Sometime during the 1980s, I was researching another book when I came across some information that startled me. I read that in many cases, alcoholism is as much a state of mind as it is a physical problem. I had assumed that a person who had stopped drinking would no longer be an alcoholic. But what I was reading, and forgive my paraphrasing as I'm not an expert on this, said that there is such a thing as alcoholic personality. In fact, a person didn't even have to drink to have this personality, and in that case, he was called a dry drunk. What interested me the most about this personality was a person who had it desperately needed to break the spirit of another human being. A dry drunk will choose the strongest, most moral, and most generous person he or she can find and then dedicate his life to trying to control and therefore change this person. The ultimate goal is to be able to say, I'm not so bad. Sure, I do bad things, but look at this person. Everybody thinks she or he is so good, but I've just proven that she or he is bad too. An example of this thinking at work is depicted in the movie Dangerous Liaisons. Liaisons? Liaisons. I give up. The characters played by Glenn Close and John Malkovich searched for the strongest, most highly moral person they can find, portrayed by Michelle Pfeiffer, and set out to destroy her. After I spent some time reading about the alcoholic personality, I knew I wanted to write about it. I also wanted a heroine who was strong but believed herself to be weak, who was generous, the kind who would help another human even if it caused her hardship, yet her generous spirit was a weakness. I mean, that is this book 1000%. It is, first off, I've never heard of a dry drunk, so that was completely new to me, but it really blew my mind. And now I feel like I kind of understand some people that I've encountered in my life. I just found that extremely interesting. I never in a million years thought my favorite love story was actually a story about alcoholism. She wanted to write this story about the particular personality known as a dry drunk without saying the word in the book. She wanted to be really subtle about writing about this type of alcoholism. She did not, and in fact, she didn't want the word mentioned at all in the book. So she met her goal to write the entire book without mentioning alcoholism, the word alcoholism once. And she made her heroine realize how strong she really was and to stand up to her controlling boyfriend and one of her sisters that she always felt inferior to. Now I can't wait to read this book again, knowing what its true underlying story is. I want to see if it changes my opinion, if I'm sharper towards reading between the lines. Now I remember how much I love the Montgomery family that she always writes about. And I really want to read the rest of her books to see if I can figure out what her underlying theme is. Because I also learned in her letter at the end that she always has a goal for every book that she writes. And now I think it would be fun to read each one and see if I can figure out what that is. That wraps up my review for A Knight in Shining Armor. It is a beautiful, beautiful love story, but be prepared. This book, you will not want to put it down once you start. So settle in for a great day of reading. All right, book nerds, that's all I got for you today. I hope you enjoyed my video. Thank you for watching. All of my social media links are down below if you want to follow me and see what I have going on down there. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you soon.